Natasha ji, CEO from India Sanitation Coalition, which is housed at FICCI. Ma'am, now you heard from national government, international perspectives, and you heard the transformation story of Orissa. Now, one of the major component in this is the cost of connection also. I mean, though Orissa somehow managed to get political buy-in and then devolve resources for this sector, but may not be all states have the same leveraging capability. Now, given this situation, what are the innovative ways in which to deal with this challenge of barrier, particularly the financial barriers that often households experience, not to bring the tap only to the house, but there's a lot of plumbing that goes inside the house. Especially in poor house, it may not be long, but in middle class and lower middle class, they may have 2, 3, one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom. So there is certain amount of investment that we need to put in beyond giving a connection. So with this, I would like you to comment and reflect on some of the deliberations that you heard this evening. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chari. Honestly, listening to the three speakers before me, I have to say that the extent of the problem really doesn't need to go to the private sector. I mean, if I look at Orissa, it's amazing what a state can actually achieve, if it really wants to. So the leadership that they've been able to show can very easily be shown by other states as well. But having said that, I do agree with you that every state is not the same, and there is a need for private sector financing. I think the central government, specifically Mahua, has very clearly indicated that they want the private sector to be involved. And we are working with them very closely in ISC, given our role as facilitator between the private sector and the government, to ensure that, wherever possible, we engage the private sector to come in and participate, either through a PPP arrangement or otherwise, in building up the infrastructure for the country. So let's just get down to the subject at hand. Just a couple of points that I want to for the listeners to keep in mind. Mr. Chari, he pointed out that the cost of connection is around 15,000, approximately around 15,000. And how much of this should come from the government, and how much of this can we get the private sector to pay for? I think Ms. Tara was actually very good in giving us the central point of view. I think the center's view is very detailed. It's very, very, it goes down to a very granular level in terms of what should be achieved. And for the first time, I'm looking at something which is quite extraordinary, which is post-implementation monitoring and evaluation. And that is clear, shows that the sense very clear that it's not just about building, but it's also about maintaining and sustainability for the long term. So I think that is very clear. And I think Mr. Mati's example of Orissa actually brings out very beautifully how the state can actually go about ensuring that this can happen. Mr. Francis talked about international programs and how they've been able to achieve, success. But the biggest complexity is India. Everybody recognizes that. And I think, the no-cost tap, but charge for meter is something that I liked particularly when he spoke about it. So just 2 points that I want you to keep in mind from the national survey. 41% of urban households have piped water into dwellings as a principal source, but what happens to the rest? So we need to answer this question. And the second point is 91% have sufficient drinking water throughout the year from the principal source, but this is mainly from common taps. Now, there is a leakage issue, and we'll come to that in the presentation. Okay, so first slide, please. Yeah. So, just go on to the next slide. Right. So here is what last mile connectivity really tells us. When you look at the National Sample Survey, in the last round, they said that 94.2% of slum households get water from standposts, bore wells, and bought water bottles. And that is clearly something that, sorry, if you can just go back. Yeah, just stay here. Yeah. So that is clearly the big conundrum that we are trying to solve. Uh, Urban water supply to slums is only approximately 5%. And we know that because of this, it is not sufficient to be able to meet the needs of the urban poor. Specifically because there is a lot of leakage that happens with pipes. And I think Matisa spoke about that in a bit of detail, where you have makeshift pipes, taps in slum homes, where secondary connections have been taken. And this is really where you get the issues around waterborne diseases and respiratory issues. Of course, this poses a bigger burden on health, morbidity, and mortality. So the center's response through the Jal Jeevan Mission is approximately, as you can see, 277,000 crores, with their share being around 76,760 crores over the next 5 years. And the balance has to either come from the state or it has to come from private sector partnerships that they will put in place, right? Next slide. Let's look at this ambitious timeline where they have said that they want to provide 100% water access across all the states in India. So they've made their announcement. They've merged the Atal mission. We've heard from Ms. Tara that now it's going to be called Amrut 2. And not Jal Jeevan Mission anymore. And that's all very good. But the first focused National Water Mission wants it to be around 139 crore households, tap connections, and 145 crore sewerage and septic connections. Now, I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that it is not, it's not only important to have a tap in the house. You have to have water. You have to have the ability to be able to move that water to the tap. So I think when you look down at the measurements that have been accorded across the city water balance plans and the city water action plans, the balance plans are effectively where they draw out the, the city plan, and the action plans are how they implement those, the blueprints. There are three things that they measure. They measure the number of household water tap connections, the number of sewer and septic tank connections, and the number of water bodies which are fully rejuvenated. So I guess you will understand that that linkage is very important. It's not just important to focus on the tap, but it's important to focus on the water that is going to come out of the tap as well. Outcome-based funding, of course, as I mentioned, this was excellent. I was really happy to see that 20-40-40, which is basically what they are looking at in terms of giving out the funding from this center. And most importantly, they're looking at a tech-based monitoring and evaluation platform called SCADA, which is going to actually monitor that things are in, coming to, are actually transparent in terms of what is being put on paper. So the weightage that they have given is around 55% for a water supply, which is really interesting, 40% for sewerage and septage, and 5% for rejuvenation of water bodies. So I think this weightage is very important to keep in mind when we are talking about water reaching the tap. Next slide, please. Right. So as I said, a tap is as good as the water it provides. And I'm just going to focus on the first project that has been announced, which is around providing universal piped water supply with household water tap connections. And the admissible projects that they've identified are, as you can see, given here. So water source improvement, freshwater treatment, water distribution system in uncovered areas, augmentation of existing water distribution system, a whole bunch of them, right? And what is interesting to note is that they are also talking about providing universal coverage of sewerage and septage management in the 500 Amrut cities. Now, this, as you know, has been brought into the overall program itself. Right. Next slide, please. Right. So what is our ground reality? I think Dr. Chari spoke about this with a lot of passion. The pay for connection. He's given examples about the different states and what they ask individuals to do. And what I've tried to do here is just, maybe give some ideas on solutions. These are our ideas, not necessarily things that are limiting. I'm sure that there are lots of other more brilliant ideas out there. But just to start off, is it possible for us to have one model for all states? Look at a standard initial cost for all APL and no charge for BPL. We've seen that it's been proven successful in not just India, but other parts of the world as well. So is that a possibility? And this is clearly for us to actually take to the center and see whether it is possible for them to drive it down with regards to the directives when they come out, because they're currently in draft. But when they come out, is it possible to make them mandatory? There is a tariff mechanism also, standard slabs for all states. Currently, as you know, there are different states have different slabs for charging tariff. And for metered states, this can be the case. For unmetered states, they can do a standard for BPL and a varied for APL. These are, again, as I said, some suggestions, and we can definitely add to these. The second procedural barrier that Dr. Chari spoke about was the property tax one. And I think that this is really clearly, when I was looking at what the states are doing today, it's disastrous, because the number of documents some states are asking for, there is no way that the slum dwellers are going to be able to provide them. Now, one thing the government did, which was brilliant, was the Aadhaar card. Pretty much everybody in India today has an Aadhaar card. And why can it not be the only document which is required when we request for a connection, when a poor person requests for a connection? This should be sufficient to be able to get him or her a tap connection. Then, of course, there is the tenure of land. Again, it's asking for land lease from an urban slum individual is completely ridiculous, given the fact that a lot of them are migrant labor and they have no access to giving to the property where they are staying. So they're asking for a tap because they're just staying there temporarily. There is no landlord, official landlord. So who is going to get them that tap? And the final one there is the information barriers. So again, as I said, migrant labor, little access to what they can actually go for under the government schemes. Is it possible for them to be able to get more information? How can we do this? Can the ULB offices, the ward offices, even the NGOs that work in those areas do a lot more advocacy around what they have the right to with regards to water? Next slide, please. Now, funding from the central budget, this is broadly, and please do remember that this is all in draft form yet. We still haven't got the final document. So I'm just showing you what this is, the proposed data looks like. So as you can see, this is the central allocation, depending upon the state size. And this is across the 4,378 cities that are covered under this program. Where I did see the ability for the private sector to come in is primarily around the reforms, technology, and IEC areas. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this in the next slide. Right. So these are the business models that I thought could be interesting, and I'd love to hear from the participants as well as my other worthy speakers, whether they believe that this is possible. Again, a lot of these business models are made up on the back of the experience that we have had working with the private sector in other areas. So definitely around wastewater treatment in the corporate area, in the urban area, around sewage, solid waste management treatment. These are some of the ideas that we have been putting in place, and it would be interesting to see whether this can actually work for the water as well. So the first one, provision of an additional tap from doorstep to inside the home, which is what Dr. Chari mentioned. Corporates are very, very keen to work in the CSR area. However, water and sanitation has always been a very difficult subject for them to understand, not because it's complex, but I guess because we have never, as a country, we have never really looked at corporate intervention in this space as we may have done with education or with children or with women, that's gender, or with nutrition or with health. But, so this is clearly, there is a need for massive advocacy in this space. And more importantly, we have to, when you talk to the private sector, you have to make them understand why it is important for them to, actually come into this particular area and add benefit. Everybody knows that the quantum of CSR funds that actually go to the Prime Minister's fund year on year, because corporates have been unable to deploy them, is massive. It's staggering. Why can't part of those funds be used for projects in the urban space, specifically because corporates and their employees are actually utilizing those areas? So, one of the business models that we have proposed here is corporates to use their CSR funding to provide additional plumbing and the second tap within the home, with the user being charged for usage of water rather than the initial fixed cost for fixing the tap in the premises. So that's the first one. The second is on a PPP partnership for laying of dual pipes. Now, this is again with regards to the experience we've had with wastewater treatment. This is about laying dual pipes, one for the supply of water to each household and the other for wastewater collection to a central point where it can be treated. And there are several models that are now have been input successfully in various tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where we've actually been able to use the existing workforces that are doing manual labor, automating it, and actually being able to provide these facilities. So the business model here is for the private sector to bid for tenders to lay the pipes at a cost plus model to the ULBs and balance to be adjusted against their CSR reserves, currently at 2% of the overall profit of any corporate, as you know. So this is a model which is very workable and something that we are now proposing to the corporate sector as we speak to them. The other business problem there is the PPP for wastewater treatment to reduce overall cost of water for municipalities, which equals to lower tariffs for water usage and then a lower usage of groundwater as well. India's got the most abysmal track record for the usage of groundwater. We have to seriously look at that problem, and that's a whole different conversation altogether. And how are we going to be able to do that? How can we reduce our usage of groundwater today? And the business model that we proposed here is for the ULB to pay for wastewater to be transported to the corporate. So we've talked about the dual pipeline system. Corporates to treat the wastewater based on the infrastructure that they already have for treatment of their own industrial wastewater and supply it back to the ULB at an adjusted cost against their need for pure water for their own operations from the ULB. So it is a circular economy. It is something that can be done. In fact, some of our large corporates have already started doing it some years ago, and there are many more corporates today who are looking at this from a benefit perspective to the communities that surround their factories and their other premises. The next one is mapping of water bodies, allow for accurate measurement of water available versus water required, and hence costing of water can be done more accurately. And the business model that we are proposing there, again, is not something new. In fact, in a lot of cities, Bangalore, for example, you will see that corporates have adopted water bodies over a long-term CSR program in the vicinity of their offices and factories, and they're working with the ULBs to ensure that the quality of water becomes far cleaner than what it was when they started out. So this is again something that I believe is very easily doable and that we can take up in a major way. And the last one, and I won't say it's my favorite, but it's honestly one that we are very excited about because we are working on this quite actively at the ISC, is technology-enabled water reforms, be they smart metering, reduction in NRW, and promotion of startup building innovations for WASH. The ULBs actively need to work, and I think I can't remember whether it was Ms. Tara. Ms. Tara mentioned this, that, they were supporting startups in a very big way as part of the document, and this is clearly something that we are very keen to take forward. So we have started our own campaign within the ISC, which we will be announcing this year. And these are the Startup Awards for the water and sanitation community. Going forward, we will be awarding 3 awards every year to accelerator level startups who have built their prototypes and are going to take them to market, to be able to work more innovatively within the water and sanitation field. We hope with this to be able to encourage and motivate a lot many more young technocrats, young entrepreneurs to come up with ideas to be able to bring forward successful innovations for this sector. This is not only about technology, it's about process as well. Because in WASH, it's not just technology, but it's process also, which, if it is made more efficient, can lead to major benefits. So that's, I think, my last slide. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Natasha ji. She has brought in 2 interesting ideas. One is she has given very practical insights of how to address the barriers. I think equally important, she brought in some interesting perspectives. As we know, the mission, Amrit mission, has been, as she said, wherein a maximum of 1/3 to 25% of the central assistance will come from Government of India, and the rest of it has to come from the state and the ULB put together. And she brought in an angle of private sector participation, corporate social responsibility participation. Except for UTs as well as northeastern states, the financing for other states are in the range of 25% to 33%. So I think her idea of introducing private sector at different levels, I think is very, very relevant and very practical. Thank you very much, ma'am, for now I think